3 years ago, my wife Emily sold our house while I was away on a work assignment, moved in with some guy named Louis she met through Instagram comments, and blocked me on every platform before I even knew what happened. I came back to an empty property with a for sale sign that said sold, and my entire life packed into storage pods I never authorized. She took everything that mattered and left me standing in the driveway of a house that wasn't mine anymore. But here's the thing. I'm not writing this to vent. I'm writing this because 2 weeks ago, Emily finally crawled back. And I've been waiting for this moment since the day I found out what she did. Every single thing I've done for 3 years has been building toward making her regret destroying my life. And now, I get to watch it all fall apart. Let me back up. Emily and I got married in 2018. We were both 26, met through mutual friends at a birthday party, dated for 2 years before getting engaged. She worked in marketing for a home goods company. I was in project management for a construction firm. We bought a house together in 2020, a three-bedroom place in a decent suburb. Nothing fancy, but it was ours, or so I thought. The problem started around 2021. Emily had always been someone who needed attention, constant validation, and I thought that was just her personality. She grew up with parents who divorced when she was 12 and spent her teenage years being shuffled between two households where neither parent really made her feel like a priority. So yeah, I understood why she needed reassurance. I tried to give her that, but it was never enough. She started spending more and more time on social media, building this whole online presence around lifestyle content. Nothing huge, maybe 8,000 followers on Instagram, but she treated it like she was about to become famous any day. And the comments from guys, she loved those. I brought it up once, said it made me uncomfortable how she was responding to some of these dudes who were clearly hitting on her, and she told me I was being controlling and insecure. Said I didn't understand how influencer culture worked. Said I was trying to dim her light. I let it go. Biggest mistake of my life, okay? I need everybody to understand something. 8,000 followers. 8,000. That's not an influencer, that's a group chat that got out of hand. My dentist has more followers than that, and he just posts pictures of teeth he's proud of. Emily was out here treating random dudes in her comments like they were talent scouts from Hollywood, while her actual husband was like, "Hey, this makes me uncomfortable." And she hit him with, "You're dimming my light." Your light? Girl, you're a desk lamp. You're a nightlight in a child's bathroom. The delusion is already astronomical, and we haven't even gotten to the crime yet. In early 2022, my company sent me on a 4-month project assignment to oversee construction on a commercial building about 6 hours away. I was staying in temporary housing, coming home every other weekend when I could. Emily said she was fine, said she understood my career was important, said she'd hold down the fort. What she was actually doing was building an entire relationship with Louis through DMs while I was gone. I didn't find out about any of this until I came home in May 2022. The project wrapped up 2 weeks early and I wanted to surprise her. Drove straight through 6 hours without stopping, thinking about how nice it would be to sleep in my own bed next to my wife. Pulled onto our street and saw the sign. Sold. Big red sold sticker right across it. I sat in my car for probably 15 minutes just staring at it. Called Emily. Straight to voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. Checked my texts. Nothing. Checked WhatsApp. Her profile picture was gone. Instagram, blocked. Facebook, blocked. Even LinkedIn, blocked. Who blocks their husband on LinkedIn? I finally got out and walked up to the house. The front door was unlocked, but the place was gutted. Not destroyed, just empty. All our furniture gone, all my stuff gone, even the curtains. There was a single envelope on the kitchen counter with my name on it. Inside was a note, handwritten, that said she had found someone who actually appreciated her, that she was starting a new chapter, and that I should contact her attorney if I had questions about the house sale. Her attorney. Like we were business partners dissolving a company, not a married couple. I found out later she had forged my signature on the sale documents. The house was in both our names, but apparently she convinced some shady notary to witness a signature that wasn't mine. She sold it for $340,000, took the money, and moved into Lewis's apartment in a city 2 hours away, all while I was working overtime to build our future. This man drove 6 hours excited. 6 hours of daydreaming about his wife, his bed, his home, and he pulls up to a crime scene. She blocked him on LinkedIn. That's such a specific level of thoroughness that it loops back around to being insane. Like she sat there going through every single app on her phone thinking, okay, Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp. Wait, what if he tries to endorse my skills? Blocked? And the note. The handwritten note on the counter like she's a villain in a heist movie, leaving her calling card. Contact my attorney. Ma'am, you committed fraud. You forged federal documents. You didn't start a new chapter, you started a criminal investigation. The next few weeks were absolute chaos. I contacted a lawyer, started the process of reporting the forgery, tried to figure out what legal options I had. The lawyer told me I had a strong case, but it would take time and money. Emily's attorney sent over divorce papers within a week. She wanted a clean break, no alimony, no asset division beyond what she'd already taken. Just sign and disappear. I didn't sign. I wasn't going to make anything easy for her. But here's what I realized during those first few months. Being angry wasn't enough. Feeling betrayed wasn't enough. If I was going to make Emily pay for what she did, I needed to be patient. I needed to be strategic. I needed to rebuild my life in a way that put me in a position of power when she eventually came crawling back. Because I knew she would. Louis was some 34-year-old failed musician who still thought his big break was coming. He had no real income, no stability, nothing except charm and Instagram followers. Emily had traded a husband with a career and a house for a guy who couldn't keep the electricity on. So I made a plan. Not some dramatic revenge fantasy, but a real plan. I was going to document everything she did during the divorce proceedings. I was going to fight the house sale in civil court. I was going to build my career until I was making 3 times what I made before. And I was going to wait 3 years. 3 years of grinding, saving, building connections, getting promoted twice. 3 years of watching Emily's Instagram posts get less and less frequent, watching Louis's music career go absolutely nowhere, watching them move from his nice apartment to a smaller one, then to what looked like a rental house in a not great neighborhood. 3 years of her family reaching out to me periodically, her mom especially, telling me Emily made a terrible mistake and asking if there was any chance of reconciliation. I was polite to her family. I even had dinner with her parents once, about a year after everything happened. Her dad, Christian, barely spoke, just sat there looking embarrassed. Her mom, Louisa, cried and apologized for how her daughter turned out. I told them I appreciated their kindness, but I wasn't interested in getting back together with Emily. What I didn't tell them was that I was keeping them close because I knew information flows both ways. Every update about Emily's struggling life was fuel for me. See, this is where most people fumble. Most people in his situation spend those 3 years posting sad quotes on social media, drunk texting at 2 a.m., becoming the crazy ex in the story she tells Louis. But this man said no. This man became a documentary filmmaker of his own revenge arc. He's having dinner with her parents, being polite, being kind, while mentally filing away every single piece of intel like he's running a covert operation. And Emily, bless her delusional heart, thought she upgraded. She looked at Louis, a 34-year-old man whose biggest accomplishment was getting verified on an app, and said, "Yes, this is better than home equity and a 401k. 3 years watching them downgrade apartments like they're speedrunning poverty. The civil case over the house sale took 2.5 years. The notary eventually admitted under pressure that he hadn't actually witnessed my signature, that Emily had paid him cash to lie. The court ruled in my favor last October. Emily was ordered to return the full sale price of the house plus damages. $340,000 she absolutely did not have anymore. That's when things started getting interesting. Emily tried to file for bankruptcy to avoid the judgment. Her attorney advised her it wouldn't work because the debt came from fraud. She tried to negotiate a payment plan, but I refused. Told my lawyer I wanted the full amount enforced. She tried to get Louis to help, but apparently their relationship was already falling apart by then. 2 weeks ago, on a Thursday evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. It was Emily, crying, saying Louis had kicked her out, saying she had nowhere to go, saying she knew she didn't deserve my help, but could I please just talk to her? I said yes, and I smiled the entire time. The notary folded. Under pressure, this man crumbled like a granola bar in a backpack, admitted everything, and suddenly Emily's whole house of cards doesn't just fall, it catches fire. She tried bankruptcy, and the court basically said, "Ma'am, you can't declare bankruptcy on crime. You can't just steal $300,000 and then be like, oopsie, I'm broke now, guess we're even." And Louis, the man she blew up her entire life for, kicked her out. The Instagram commenter, the SoundCloud musician, the guy whose biggest flex was probably owning a guitar. He looked at Emily and said, "I don't want you here anymore. The call is coming from inside the house and the house isn't even hers anymore." Update 1. So a lot happened since my last post, and some of you asked for details about the phone call with Emily. Here's the thing. I didn't just agree to talk to her out of nowhere. When she called crying about Louis kicking her out, I already knew exactly how I wanted this conversation to go. I'd literally rehearsed it in my head for 3 years. I told her to meet me at a diner near where I live. Neutral ground, public place. She agreed immediately, sounded desperate, kept thanking me for even being willing to see her. I hung up and sat there for probably 20 minutes just thinking about how this was finally happening. All that patience, all that waiting. And now she was going to sit across from me and explain why she destroyed everything. We met that Saturday afternoon. She looked rough, not dramatically terrible, but clearly worn down, thinner than I remembered, dark circles under her eyes, wearing clothes that looked like she'd grabbed them in a hurry. She tried to hug me when she walked in and I stepped back, told her we could talk, but that was it. The conversation lasted almost 2 hours. Emily spent the first 30 minutes trying to explain herself, going on about how she felt neglected when I was away for work, how she was lonely and scared, and Louis made her feel seen for the first time in years. She kept saying she knew it was wrong, but she genuinely believed I didn't love her anymore, that I was choosing my career over our marriage, that she felt like she was disappearing. I let her talk. Not because I cared about her excuses, but because I wanted her to hear herself. Every justification she made just proved she was the same person who needed constant validation, no matter what it cost everyone else. When she finally paused, I asked her one question. Did she really think selling our house behind my back and forging my signature was something a person does when they feel neglected? Did that seem proportional to her? She started crying again. Said she panicked. Said Louis convinced her it was the only way to make a clean break. Said she was in such a fog at the time that she just went along with it. I asked her about the money. Where was the $340,000 from the house sale? She admitted most of it was gone. Louis' apartment had been expensive, they'd traveled, she'd invested in some online business venture he was running that went nowhere. She estimated maybe $40,000 was left. Spread across accounts? She wasn't even sure she could access anymore because Louis controlled everything. $40,000 out of $340,000. In less than 3 years, she'd burned through $300,000 on a lifestyle with a man she met in Instagram comments. $300,000. Gone. In under 3 years. I need everyone to do the math on this because it's actually incredible. That's $100,000 a year. That's over $8,000 a month. On what? On Louis' expensive apartment. On travel? On his business venture? What business was Louis running? A competition to see how fast two people can speedrun financial ruin. And Emily's sitting there saying, Louis controlled everything, like that's supposed to make her sympathetic. Girl, you left a man who was working overtime for your future to be with a man who made you an accountant for your own destruction. You went from being a partner to being a piggy bank, and somehow that felt like freedom to you. I stayed calm, told her I wasn't surprised, told her the court judgment was $340,000 plus $52,000 in damages and interest, and that my attorney had already started enforcement proceedings. I explained what that meant since she clearly didn't understand. Wage garnishment, property liens, bank account levies, the whole process. Everything she earned, everything she owned, everything she might inherit someday. All of it was on the table until that debt was paid. She looked at me like I'd slapped her, started asking if there was any way we could work something out. Maybe a payment plan. Maybe I could reduce the amount. Maybe we could just call it even since the marriage was over anyway. I told her no. I told her she stole my house and my money and my dignity, and I was going to take every legal option available to get it back. Then she played her next card. She told me she had nowhere to go. Louis had literally thrown her belongings into the hallway of their rental house and changed the locks. Her credit was ruined from unpaid bills during their relationship. She couldn't afford first and last month's rent anywhere. She asked if I could help her just temporarily, just until she figured things out. I said absolutely not. Told her to go to her parents. And that's where things got complicated because apparently her parents' situation had changed since the last time I talked to them. Louisa, Emily's mom, had been diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's about 8 months prior. Christian, her dad, was now her full-time caregiver, and they'd had to sell their house and move into a smaller place to afford her care. Emily going to live with them meant adding stress to an already overwhelmed household. I didn't know about Louisa's diagnosis. Nobody had told me. And I'll be honest, for about 30 seconds I felt something like sympathy. Louisa had always been kind to me, even after everything Emily did. But then I remembered that Emily's problems were Emily's problems. She made her choices. Emily moved in with her parents anyway because she had no other option. Christian texted me a few days later, not asking for anything, just letting me know the situation. Said Emily was sleeping on their couch, barely functional, spending most of her time staring at her phone, waiting for Louis to contact her. Even after everything Louis put her through, she was still hoping he'd take her back. Her mother has Alzheimer's. Her father is now a full-time caregiver. They had to sell their house. And Emily, after burning through $300,000, is now sleeping on their couch, adding to their stress. But here's the part that genuinely broke something in my brain. She's lying on that couch, in her parents' cramped apartment after losing everything, her husband, her money, her home, her dignity, and she's still staring at her phone, hoping Louis calls her back. Louis, the man who threw her stuff in the hallway, the man who changed the locks on her. She's not reflecting. She's not learning. She's not thinking, maybe I made a mistake. She's thinking, maybe he'll text. That's not love. That's a hostage situation with her own delusion. Here's where it gets interesting. Louis apparently didn't appreciate Emily telling people their relationship fell apart. The following week, I got a message on Instagram from him directly. First time he'd ever contacted me. He introduced himself like I didn't know who he was, said he wanted to clear the air, said Emily was a manipulative person who had ruined his life, and he wanted me to know the truth about her. I read that message probably 5 times. This guy, this absolute piece of work who helped my wife steal from me, was now trying to bond with me over how terrible she was. Like we were both victims of Emily and should be friends. I didn't respond to him, but I didn't block him either, because something occurred to me. Louis had been living with Emily for 3 years. He knew things about where that money went. He knew about accounts, transactions, purchases. If I could get him to keep talking, keep trying to convince me he was innocent, he might accidentally give me information I could use to trace more assets. My attorney had been having trouble locating all of Emily's financial records. She claimed ignorance about a lot of it, but I knew she was hiding something. And now Louis was reaching out, trying to make himself look good at her expense. Meanwhile, Emily started texting me, long, rambling messages at odd hours, alternating between apologizing and blaming me for being cold to her at the diner. She said I had always made her feel like she wasn't enough, like she had to perform constantly to earn my love, like nothing she did would ever satisfy me. She said Louis had seen the real her and appreciated her in ways I never could. Then in the next message, she'd be crying about how Louis was a monster who controlled every aspect of her life. I saved every single text, not because I was documenting for court, but because I wanted to remember exactly who she was when this was over. Louis. This man had the audacity to message the husband. Hey bro, I know I helped your wife commit fraud and spent 3 years living off your money, but actually she's the bad guy here. The lack of self-awareness is genuinely impressive. And our guy, this absolute chess player, doesn't respond, but doesn't block him either because he realizes Louis is so desperate to look innocent that he'll accidentally snitch on himself. That's not revenge. That's judo. He's using Louis's own stupidity against him. Meanwhile, Emily is sending texts at 3 a.m. that basically say, I hate you, I miss you, Louis was better, Louis was a monster, you never loved me, please love me. She's having an entire argument with herself and CCing him on it. Christian reached out again that weekend, asked if I would consider coming to dinner at their place to talk things through as a family. Said Louisa was having more good days than bad lately, and she kept asking about me, asking if Emily and I had worked things out. He thought maybe if we all sat down together some kind of resolution could happen. I said yes, but not for the reason he thought. Update 2. The family dinner happened, and I need to process this because it went in directions I didn't expect. Some of you warned me about getting too close to Emily's family again, and yeah, fair point. But I got exactly what I needed out of this. First, Louis. Between my last post and the dinner, he sent me probably 15 messages on Instagram, all unprompted. This guy was desperate to convince me he was a victim too, kept going on about how Emily manipulated him, how she promised she had money saved, how she told him their marriage was already over before she moved out. But here's what he let slip. He mentioned Emily still has a car, a 2021 Subaru Outback registered in her name that she told me was repossessed during the bankruptcy attempt. He was complaining about how she never contributed to expenses, even though she had this car she refused to sell. Called it her escape vehicle. I forwarded those messages to my attorney immediately. If Emily lied about assets during enforcement proceedings, that's a serious problem for her. Now the dinner. Friday evening at Christian and Louisa's new place, a small 2-bedroom apartment in a retiree complex. Nothing like their old house. Louisa was in the living room when I arrived, and honestly, it took me a second to recognize her. Thinner, distant look that came and went all evening. We ate and pretended this was normal for about 20 minutes. Then Christian addressed why we were really there. He said he understood there was a judgment against Emily, and wanted to know if we could resolve this without destroying her future completely. Said she made terrible mistakes, but she was still his daughter. I told him the judgment wasn't spite. Emily committed fraud. She forged my signature, she stole my equity and disappeared. The court agreed she owed me and I intended to collect. Emily spoke up then. Started going on about how I was being vindictive, how 3 years had passed and I should have moved on, how this anger was hurting me more than anyone. Said she knew what she did was wrong, but she'd already lost everything. I asked her what exactly was left. Asked about the Subaru that was supposedly repossessed. Her face went blank before she said she didn't know what I was talking about. I told her Louis had been messaging me, seemed very eager to share details. She looked like she wanted to throw something. Louis is the gift that keeps on giving. 15 unsolicited messages trying to make himself look like the victim. And he just casually mentions the hidden car. The Subaru Emily swore was repossessed. Her escape vehicle. This man is so desperate to throw Emily under the bus that he's literally handing over evidence like he's working for the prosecution. And at that dinner table, when our guy mentions the car and says Louis has been messaging me, Emily's face went blank. That's the face of someone whose two ex-partners just became an investigative team. She's watching her own lies get fact-checked in real time by the man she cheated with, helping the man she cheated on. Christian made a proposal. They'd gotten about $220,000 from selling their house. After medical expenses and the apartment, they had roughly $170,000 left. He'd planned to give Emily $50,000 to restart her life, asked if I'd accept that as partial settlement and reduce the judgment. This man, dealing with his wife's illness, offering money meant for their security to bail out his daughter who already burned through $300,000. And Emily sat there watching her father sacrifice for her. Again, I said no. I wouldn't take money from them that Louisa needed for her care. But I also told him any assets Emily received or inherited would be subject to the judgment. Meaning if he gave Emily that $50,000, my attorney would file to seize it immediately. Emily started crying. Said I was cutting her off from her own family, making sure she had nothing and no one. Said this wasn't about money anymore. This was punishment forever. I told her she was right. This was about punishment because what she did deserved it. I spent months coming home to an empty house, dealing with lawyers while she spent my money on vacations with a guy she met online. She doesn't get to decide when I stop being angry. Then Louisa spoke up. She'd been quiet, occasionally confused, but she looked directly at Emily and said something lucid. She remembered when Emily called right after selling the house, how excited she sounded, how she talked about finally being free with someone who understood her. Said Emily didn't sound confused or manipulated. She sounded like someone who got exactly what she wanted. Emily just stared at her mother. Christian is trying to hand over $50,000 from his wife's medical fund to save his daughter, who already burned through $300,000. And this man said no. Not because he wanted to hurt Christian and Louisa, but because he knew Emily would just run through that money too. And then Louisa, with Alzheimer's, having good days and bad days, cuts through everything with perfect clarity. She remembered that phone call. She remembered how happy Emily sounded. Not confused, not manipulated, not scared, excited. Finally free. That's Emily's own mother testifying against her narrative. You can lie to your ex-husband. You can lie to courts. You can lie to yourself. But when your mother with a fading memory still remembers your joy at betraying your husband, that's a verdict no lawyer can appeal. I left shortly after. Christian walked me out and asked me to reconsider. Said Emily had nowhere to turn. Said he was afraid of what might happen if she felt completely cornered. I told him Emily made choices with consequences. Here's what I didn't tell him. My attorney already started locating the Subaru. If Emily lied about that asset, we can petition for contempt. That means potential jail time. Also, Louis's latest messages mentioned Emily having a storage unit somewhere with stuff from our old house she never told me about. Items she claimed were sold or donated. He's giving me everything I need without realizing it. Final update. This is the last update. Everything came together faster than I expected, and I want to close this chapter properly. Christian showed up at my workplace the Monday after the dinner. Just walked into the lobby and asked reception to get me. My manager came to my desk looking confused. Said there was an older gentleman insisting he needed 5 minutes. I went down expecting some kind of plea for Emily, but that's not what happened. Christian looked like he hadn't slept. He told me Emily had done something stupid. Over the weekend, she'd gone to Louis's place trying to get back together with him. Louis refused to let her in, so she sat in her car outside his house for 6 hours. Louis eventually called the police, and they made her leave. Christian said Emily came home that night completely broken, finally accepting Louis was never going to take her back. But here's the important part. Christian said he couldn't protect Emily anymore. He said watching her try to crawl back to the man she threw away her marriage for made him realize she hadn't learned anything. She was still chasing validation from someone who didn't care about her instead of taking responsibility. He told me he understood why I was doing what I was doing, and he wasn't going to interfere anymore. Then he handed me a piece of paper. It was the address of Emily's storage unit and the access code. He said if there was anything in there that belonged to me, I should take it back. Said Emily had no right to keep things she stole. I thanked him, genuinely thanked him because I know how hard that was for a father to do. 6 hours. She sat outside Louis's house for 6 hours like she was waiting for concert tickets. The man who spent her money, controlled her life, threw her stuff in the hallway, and she's still outside his house hoping he'll change his mind. That's not love. That's an addiction. And that's the moment Christian finally broke. Not when she stole from her husband, not when she forged documents, not when she burned through $300,000. It was watching his daughter sit outside a man's house for 6 hours, begging to be let back into the cage she just escaped from. Christian handed over the storage unit information like he was finally admitting who his daughter actually is. A father giving up on his own child isn't revenge. That's tragedy. That weekend, I went to the storage unit with my brother Ethan. We opened it expecting maybe some furniture or boxes. What we found was basically half the contents of my old house. My grandfather's watch collection that Emily claimed was lost in the move, photo albums from my family, power tools my dad gave me, a box of my late mother's jewelry that I thought was gone forever. 3 years of believing these things were sold or thrown away, and they were sitting in a climate-controlled unit 20 minutes from where Emily was living. I took everything, loaded it into Ethan's truck, and brought it home. Then I texted Emily a photo of the empty unit with one line. I got my stuff back. She responded within minutes. Furious. Said those were her memories too. Said I had no right to take things without asking. Said she was going to call the police. I told her to go ahead. Everything in that unit was either mine before marriage or joint property that she illegally retained after the house sale. My attorney had already advised me I was within my rights. The Subaru situation resolved itself around the same time. My attorney located the vehicle registration and filed a motion to include it as an asset subject to the judgment. Emily got served with papers demanding she surrender the vehicle or face contempt charges. 2 days later, she drove it to a lot my attorney specified and handed over the keys. That car was worth about $18,000. Not much compared to what she owes, but it was something. I asked my attorney about the contempt petition for lying about the car during proceedings. He said we could pursue it, but jail time was unlikely for a first offense. What we could do was use the threat of contempt to compel full disclosure of any other hidden assets. Emily had to provide a sworn statement listing everything she owned, every account, every item of value. If she lied again, the consequences would be severe. She submitted the statement. According to her, she now owned almost nothing. Clothes, a laptop, some costume jewelry. Everything else was either gone or being seized. The wage garnishment would start as soon as she found employment. Any tax refunds would be intercepted. If she ever inherited anything from her parents, it would go to the judgment first. His grandfather's watch, his mother's jewelry, photo albums. She kept these things in storage for 3 years. Not because she wanted them, but because she didn't want him to have them. That's not greed, that's cruelty. That's holding someone's dead mother's jewelry hostage out of pure spite. And when he texts her, I got my stuff back, she has the audacity to say those were her memories too? Ma'am, it was his grandfather's watch collection, his mother's jewelry, his family photos. You didn't want the memories, you wanted the leverage. And now she owns nothing. A laptop, some costume jewelry, every paycheck garnished, every tax refund intercepted. She went from finally free to financially imprisoned for the rest of her foreseeable future. Emily asked to meet one more time. I agreed because I wanted to look her in the face when this was finished. We met at the same diner. She looked worse than before, hollow in a way that was different from just tired. She started talking immediately, said she finally understood what she did to me, said she knew sorry wasn't enough, said she spent 3 years convincing herself she was the victim, when really she destroyed both our lives for someone who never actually loved her. She asked what would make this stop, what would satisfy me. Was there any amount of suffering that would be enough? I told her the truth. I told her I'd spent 3 years building toward this moment, imagining what it would feel like when she finally understood the consequences of what she did. And now that I was here, watching her with nothing and no one, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt tired. I felt like I'd wasted 3 years of my life focused on someone who wasn't worth the energy. But I also told her I wasn't going to stop. The judgment would stand. The garnishments would continue. Every legal avenue available to me would be pursued until I got back what she stole. Not because I needed the money anymore, but because she needed to understand that actions have consequences that don't just disappear when you feel bad enough. She asked if I could ever forgive her. I said no. I said forgiveness was for people who made mistakes, not for people who made calculated choices to betray the person who trusted them most. What she did wasn't a mistake. It was a plan, and plans have consequences. She left the diner crying. I finished my coffee. Was there any amount of suffering that would be enough? That question tells you everything. She's not asking how to make it right. She's asking when she gets to stop feeling bad. That's the same brain that thought, I feel neglected, was justification for fraud. And his answer is the most honest thing anyone has ever said about revenge. He doesn't feel satisfied. He feels tired. He wasted 3 years of his life obsessing over someone who wasn't worth the energy. He got everything he wanted, and it didn't fix anything, didn't heal anything, didn't make him whole. But he's still not stopping. Because some lessons only land when they cost something. Emily wanted closure. She wanted him to say, okay, we're even now. And he said no. Plans have consequences. That's not anger anymore. That's principle. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, I've gotten updates from Christian periodically. Emily moved out of her parents' apartment and into a room she's renting from someone she found online. She got a job at a retail store making barely above minimum wage. The garnishment paperwork is already in process. As for me, I finally put my grandfather's watch back on. First time wearing it in 3 years. My mom's jewelry is in a safe deposit box, waiting for whenever I meet someone who deserves it. And I sleep better than I have since 2022. When Emily called me from Louis's doorstep crying that first night, I smiled because I knew exactly how this would end. She spent $300,000 of my money on a fantasy that collapsed in 3 years. I spent 3 years making sure she'd pay for every single dollar of it. The title of this post says I crafted the most brutal revenge she could never escape. But the truth is, I didn't have to create anything. Her choices were the punishment. I just made sure she couldn't run from them.